Hello, my name is Elena Graf. I've published 6 novels, and I'll be publishing another this fall. I'm here in Wells, Maine. Welcome to the office where I write. The GCLS has invited authors to post readings of their work. Unfortunately, this year we can't get together for our regular conference, so this is a great way for authors to connect with our readers, and we really appreciate it. Today I'm going to read from my historical novel, Acts of Contrition. It's a GCLS finalist in historical fiction. The winner last year was the previous novel in this series called Lies of Omission. Acts of Contrition takes place in Germany after World War II. It begins with a brutal rape scene, so heads up to anyone who finds that subject difficult. But don't worry, the rape isn't in this reading. My inclusion of a rape in this book was not gratuitous. It's estimated that 1.4 million women were raped after the Russians invaded Germany. And that's only in what we used to call East Germany. In the city of Berlin, over 100,000 women were raped, including the main character in Acts of Contrition. Margareta von Stahler is an aristocratic physician, one of the 25 women certified to practice surgery in Germany at that time. Previously, she was the mentor to another female surgeon, an American by the name of Sarah Weber. After the war, Sarah returns to Berlin with the American Army. When she looks for Margareta, she finds her in a horrible state. With the help of the nuns in Margareta's Catholic hospital, Sarah nurses her mentor back to health. But Sarah must leave on a mission. When she returns, she discovers that Margareta has checked herself out of the hospital against medical advice. This is what Sarah has to say about that. She stood there, smiling and looking perfectly dignified. Meanwhile, I was so furious I could have strangled her. As we're being so informal, she said lightly, perhaps you will permit me to call you Sarah? I don't give a rat's ass what you call me. How dare you discharge yourself? She laughed softly. I am a physician, you know. You're a fucking idiot. Oh dear, she replied, raising a brow. She clucked her tongue softly. Epithets are entirely unnecessary. Margareta will do. She gestured toward the sofa. Now let's sit down, shall we? I still tire from standing. This observation was so completely rational I couldn't argue with it. Besides, I felt guilty for making her stand with a broken leg. As she approached the sofa, I saw that she had become quite adept at using her crutches. She nodded to a seat, and I understood that she wouldn't sit unless I did. Even though I was still angry, I obeyed. The pull of her authority from the past was too strong to resist. The Germans are very particular about their space, but she sat close to me. Now, dear Sarah, let's begin again. She took my hand and kissed me on the cheek. I don't know why this simple gesture of affection took me by surprise. Before I'd left Berlin in 1939, we were beyond being just mentor and protege, although I hesitate to call us friends. What a delight to see you again, she continued with a disarming smile. Despite her icy, aristocratic demeanor, she could be charming. You look wonderful, my dear, ever so dashing in that uniform. Thank you, I mumbled, feeling confused and somewhat intimidated. As always, she had taken control of the situation and left me feeling young and foolish. I tried to recover some poise by remembering why I had jumped into a jeep and driven all the way out to Grunewald. Damn it, Margareta, why couldn't you just wait for me to get back from Frankfurt? Because I had the distinct sense that you were protecting me at great risk to yourself. I wondered what that bastard O'Brien had said to her, but she was right about my exceeding the bounds of my authority and keeping her at St. Hilda's. I'm sorry they made you feel uncomfortable. Actually, not. They ignored me. I wish I could have done more. Yes, of course. She smiled to reassure me. Now that the bruises had mostly faded, I saw the woman I remembered from before the war. She was still damn attractive, although she was nearing 50. She didn't even look close to her age. White hair was encroaching on the blonde, but her hair was so pale it was barely noticeable. Her skin was unlined. She had put on some makeup and her hands had been recently manicured. Despite having just returned like Lazarus from the dead, she had good color and looked rested. I reached for her pulse, and I was surprised that she didn't fight me. Doctors, including myself, make lousy patients, but she sat quietly while I counted the beats. Let me check the wounds. She withdrew her hand in a dismissive gesture. No need, my dear. There's no sign of infection. If any of those Russians had syphilis, all that penicillin you pumped into me dealt with it. This brought up another issue, which fortunately hadn't materialized. I ran a pregnancy test. It was negative. She stared at me. I never considered that possibility. I didn't think you were in menopause. Absolutely not. She raised her chin, meaning to look indignant, yet she only succeeded in showing that the soft skin at her throat had acquired the texture of fine crepe. How these subtle signs of aging must have wounded a woman of her vanity. At least let me take your pressure and listen to your chest, and really you should let me take a look at those wounds. Don't you trust my judgment? She asked with a scowl. Doctors should never treat themselves. It's bad medicine. She rolled her eyes. Dear Sarah, don't lecture me now that you've ascended to captain. Examine me if you must, but spare me the lesson. She was impossible, which was exactly why I found her so fascinating. I glanced around for my medical bag, only to discover that in my anger I'd left it in the Jeep. I need my bag. She put her hand on my arm to stop me from getting up. Kraus will send someone to fetch it. She rang for her butler, who appeared in moments. While she gave him brisk instructions in rapid-fire German, he glared at me. I don't think he likes me, I muttered after he left. Oh, don't mind Kraus. He never entertains feelings about such matters. On the other hand, he will never forgive you for upstaging him when he only meant to announce you. You must remember, Sarah, that we Germans observe protocol. In a few minutes, a man with pale yellow hair and a pronounced lisp came in with my medical bag. I opened it to remove my stethoscope. Oh, not here, Sarah, said Margareta, shaking her head in disapproval. It's the library. I glanced around. Yes, it was an enormous room with no less than 7 doors, but we were completely alone. Come, let's go to my quarters. She easily got to her feet and moved quickly on her crutches. I grabbed my bag and followed her down the hall. We shall take the lift, she said. I still find the stairs impossible. I couldn't imagine even attempting the grand marble staircase in the atrium on crutches. On the way to her room, I took in the sights. Although I'd been in Margareta's house a couple of times, I'd only seen a few of the public areas on the first floor. The place was enormous, 3 floors and God knows how many rooms. I had expected a house full of Rococo furniture, trimmed with gilt and rooms stuffed with old things. In fact, the house was sparsely furnished, and the furniture and paintings were genuinely valuable and clearly reflected the sophisticated tastes of their owner. There were military trappings everywhere, including a display of antique swords along the wall. Margareta stopped and nodded to a door. I understood that I was to open it for her. My quarters. When I followed her inside, I didn't understand at first. We had arrived in a room with several overstuffed chairs and comfortable sofas. "Where do you sleep?" I asked. She cocked a brow to let me know I was being too inquisitive, but she pointed to a door. "That is my bedchamber. The next door, my dressing room, which adjoins my bath. Next is a lavatory, and over there, my private library with a small study. That door leads to the maid's workroom. To the left is another lavatory." "It's a whole apartment. A family could live here." "Thank you." It was threatened. So many were driven from their homes in the bombings. Fortunately, we are far from the city, so it never came to pass. I opened my bag and removed my stethoscope and my pressure cuff, then sized up her outfit to decide how far she needed to disrobe for the examination. She was wearing a cardigan, a silk blouse, and a flowing skirt. I told her to take off the sweater and blouse and open the skirt to the waist. She frowned, and I could feel her silent judgment. Probably she thought my patient management was too informal or not thorough enough. I should have done a pelvic examination to make sure those wounds were healing. But now that I was faced with a formidable woman rather than a beaten and helpless patient, I couldn't bring myself to insist. My ambivalence was heightened as she began to undress. Ordinarily, I would step out of the room, but in that informal setting with another doctor, such a thing seemed prudishly modest. Margareta, for her part, was completely matter of fact. Of course, she knew that her body, even in middle age, was beautiful, and she was totally at ease undressing in front of me. Yet as she unbuttoned her blouse to reveal a gorgeous lace brassiere, I felt faint. Never, not even for a moment, have I ever felt anything but professional with a patient. I tried to force my mind into the space it occupies when I am in my doctor role, but it just didn't work. I decided to take in the view from the window while she finished undressing. The examination helped me focus. I took her blood pressure, examined the nodes in her neck and armpits for any swelling, inspected the wounds on her forehead and shoulder. Everything was healing textbook perfect, and the examination, despite my worries, was going fine. I was placing the diaphragm of my stethoscope on her breast above that beautiful lace brassiere when my hand began to tremble. Of course, she noticed. She never missed a trick. Of course. "So, to create a distraction," I asked, "does that tremor in your hand still bother you?" "It comes and goes." "We never did find any neurological etiology, no nerve damage." "Nothing." "Yes, but you know how these things are. Sometimes I think they're caused by animal spirits." "It's just a minor tremor," I said with a shrug. "I don't think you should worry too much about it." "I wouldn't, except the more I try to steady my hand, the more it shakes." She demonstrated for me. Her hand shook noticeably. Obviously, it will keep me from the operating room. "Relax your hand. The tension is making it worse." I am relaxing my hand. I could see by the flex of the fingers that she was right. I also saw that the fingers weren't trembling as much as would be expected from muscular tension, but the whole hand. I wasn't a neurologist, but it all seemed very odd to me. We used to joke about Margareta's proverbial nerves of steel. In the OR, she never faltered, doubted, or trembled until now. "After we've taken off the cast and you're more mobile, we'll run some more tests." She smiled ironically. "Oh, do you suppose they'll allow me into the hospital? I'm only the chief of staff after all." "You can come to my unit if you feel so uncomfortable." "Actually, I don't care, but speaking of discomfort, I'm rather chilly without my blouse." I murmured an apology and hurried to finish my examination. I listened to her heart and lungs and found her as healthy as could be. She had the slow, even heartbeat of a lifelong athlete. She was even beginning to fill out a bit, which was much more attractive than her skeletal appearance during her convalescence, and the weight was going to all the right places. I see you're putting on a little weight, I observed casually. That's good. At least there's something decent to eat here. I have an appetite like a beast, but I'm very fussy about what I eat. She allowed me to have a look at the abdominal wound. Like the others, it was healing perfectly. She asked me about the hematoma and the tear in the spleen as I palpated the area and insisted that I explain every detail. As if I could remember. I'd operated on dozens of patients since then. Margareta, on the other hand, had a photographic memory and could repeat details about patients she'd treated as a surgical resident under Sauerbruch in the 1920s. While she dressed, I returned to the window to admire the scenery. I was unaware that she had gotten up until I heard the thump of the crutches on the wooden floorboards. I haven't thanked you yet for looking after me while I was ill, said Margareta, standing beside me at the window. I shrugged. I was just doing my job. Hardly your job. You are a military officer. I am the enemy. Never. You're my friend. She spent a long time studying me. Yes, I suppose we can be friends now. She continued to gaze at me with those dark eyes. I had always found it odd that blue eyes could appear so dark, and I found myself lost in them. Please join me for supper, she said, bringing me back to reality. I can't. I've got to get back to my unit. I'm supposed to get new orders today. Ah, is this the cause of your elevation to captain? Well, yes. If this pans out the way my CO expects, they'll have to promote me through the ranks pretty quickly. And how does your commander expect it to pan out? She asked, mocking my American slang. I've become the primary liaison between the U.S. Army and the local medical authorities. I'll be overseeing the medical aid for my government. How very impressive. Her crisp British accent always made her remarks sound cynical, but in this case it was praise, and I basked in it. My first move will be to get you back to St. Hilda's. She gave me a strange look. There's no hurry, my dear. We need you. There aren't enough surgeons. She frowned and raised her hand, which trembled slightly. There's this, remember? When I reached out and took her hand, the trembling stopped. I had my own suspicions about the tremor and wondered why it was still there. You're still weak from the convalescence. Once you've completely recovered, you'll be as good as new. I gave her a big smile of encouragement. We shall see. She sank down in a nearby chair with a sigh. I'm sorry, Sarah, but I can't stand long. The clock in the hall struck 3, and as much as I wanted to stay, it was impossible. My duty began at 4, and given the condition of the roads, it would require skillful navigation of the rubble and potholes to arrive on time. Thank you for listening to my reading today. This technology is wonderful, and it's helping us get through this pandemic. But I hope we all get to see one another real soon.